Hello, my name is Eric. I'm going to talk about culture in the classroom. So it's really important to understand culture in the classroom because it helps you truly understand like what students are in your classroom and how to go. But first, you must know what culture is. So it's defined by understanding culture as the system of shared beliefs, values, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that the members of society use to interact with the world and with one another. So this is pretty much just saying that it's a combination of all the factors that affects an individual and where they grew up with, who they grew up with, different life events that happened to them, and it pretty much just brings that all in, and that's what defines an individual's culture. um, when going through what students you have, there's definitely more to a student than just or to their culture than just the food that they have, music, uh, history, holidays, clothing. It's so much more than that. There's all these traditions, values, beliefs that come with that culture, uh, and it's different throughout the entire world. So it's important to really understand and do some research into figuring out what is common culture in the different places that a student might come from. Culture is dynamic and constantly changing, and so it is important to stay up to date on to what is actually going on within that culture that a student might be coming to you from. For example, if it was today and you have some students from Syria, all the um, refugees and all just the instability within the country definitely changes as to how you will react to those students that are coming to your classroom. It's an ever going just changing of culture throughout every individual in every single culture on this face of the earth. So it's just important to keep up to date as to what you're doing. Um, Although you might have all these things that might be what are culturally norms or cultural norms or just like it's they're not for you to stereotype about or anything like that. It's just a set of beliefs to kind of help guide you on your way. But it's so important to know that uh, every single student has an individual identity. They're not defined by their culture. They are coming to if they're coming to the United States, they're learning the American culture as well, and they're having a hard time balancing that. But every single child, every single student does have an individual identity that they are really just trying to hone in on and figure out where they are and who they are and how to just be great students in the classroom as most want to be. But it's now our job as educators to know that everyone does come from different things. So that's why we have a cultural responsive pedagogy, which pretty much just states that uh, we look at children and we look at students as what they are, and we try to understand where they come from, their cultures, and like that, and then we design our curriculum and how we're going to teach in a ways that supports them in the culture that they come from, and pretty much achieves their greatest potential. Because if they're not going to achieve their greatest potential, that's because of something that you're doing. It's on you, and you must adapt to uh, your education style and your teaching style, so that way they can truly understand what they are, and above all else, feel belonged in the classroom, in the school, and hopefully just here in general if they are coming from a different culture. Um, it's vitally important for all these students to understand. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration, but one thing that you must be is culturally responsive. So cultural responsivity is just like there's a few guidelines to go through to just kind of help you be aware of where you're coming from, where the students are coming from, and just create a great environment in the classroom as an educator. So these include developing your own cultural awareness. So this means what about you defines your culture, and figuring out, and so that requires a little bit of reflecting and seeing where you come from, and then like we talked about, being aware of what is the cultural norms that's coming from, and just being aware of all that's coming in. And then another one is to just appreciate that you have all these diverse views in the classroom, to just look on different topics in totally different perspectives that most students wouldn't have. And it's really important to appreciate that and have those students feel that their views are wanted and needed in the classroom for learning to really occur and be at its greatest and richest content. Another one is as much as you know your own culture and everything, that you don't want to impose your own values on a student coming in. When you oppose your own values, you make them feel like their culture isn't good enough and that their worth isn't good enough, and that's the last thing you want for a student to be feeling in your classroom. And then, like we talked about earlier, you have all these different things that are cultural norms in their culture that they're coming from, but at the same time you don't want to stereotype, because every single day there's people breaking down stereotypes, and it's very important that they are aware of this, because if they just believe one thing, and if you believe one thing, that if you're from Asia, that you should just be good at math and that you should have this, that's a huge stereotype that necessarily isn't true, and it's not right for us as educators to be putting either that pressure on them or be ignorant enough to believe these stereotypes and allow them to come into our classroom. And so this means, going off that, this means that you should be aware of your own bias as a teacher. Do you have, if you have these stereotypes in your head or with another culture, try to keep those biases out of the classroom and not let that student feel affected by any bias that you might have. Treat every individual as an individual in the classroom. That just because there's 3 boys from Mexico and a brother or sister from France, and they're all just an individual, and they all have their own individuality, and it's just important to understand that. But you should build on the students' strengths that they have. So they're going to have they're going to be strong students in the classroom. No matter where they're coming from, any student has the potential to be a strong student, and it's just really important to build on those strengths and push them. And as they're going in deeper and deeper and just figuring out what they're trying to do, just keep pushing them to be the best students that they essentially can be in the classroom. And then another one is to just show that the students' culture, they can share it with the classroom. Show videos of their culture. Have them teach some of the parts about their culture. It's awesome. And then you can learn what you can from them. You can learn on your own research, and just really bring it into the classroom and almost bridge that gap and make them feel that they can see themselves in the classroom. They're not just seeing, especially as we talked in the classroom, you don't want to see just a class of white kids. If they're different or something, you want them to be able to feel involved and engaged in the classroom. Accept your own naiveness about what's going on. There's a lot of times that we don't even realize what's going on, but we must, as educators, be willing to accept that while we didn't even realize that was going on. But I want to do the best I can to help the student and make sure that this is going on in a great way. And then remember that everything is about the journey, not just about where you are now or at the end of the year. There's so much to learn from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, and that's what you're really looking at, is that whole chunk of time where you're spending time with the student, where you're getting them comfortable in the classroom, you're getting them comfortable with every other student in the classroom, and just really making them feel wanted and at place in the classroom, so that they can, again, reach their greatest potential, which is, as an educator, that's all you can really be asked of. So we have all these different things, but now what can you do with all this? You hear about cultural pedagogy, you know that everyone's an individual, but what can you do to learn about a culture and then implement things into your classroom, so that way that person does feel like they're engaged and they can see themselves in the classroom and all those types of things. So one thing they can do is just go to your library online or an actual library, and just read up on different cultures, learn history, learn cultural norms. So that way you're just at least not shocked if a student comes in and they don't want to make eye contact with you because it's seen as a disrespectful thing because of the hierarchy, or if personal space is not taught there, if talking on a turn is not a cultural norm there. It's a huge culture shock to be coming to the United States and being in just a totally different style and setting of just life is so different. Again, like look on the internet, you can find so many resources, and then surround yourself with different cultural celebrations. So this can be just going to like a festival that's like a local West African festival. Like that is something that can broaden your horizons and have you be able to have a connection with a student if they're from West Africa, or if you have just honestly just any student from anywhere. If you can attend stuff that makes you feel like you're there, it's a great tool to have to be able to bring that student in. Another thing is to show when you're showing stuff in the classroom. So whether it's videos, books, just talking about different things that are going on, that you're showing that you're not just having white people in books. Like it's very important because our demographic is changing so much, and before you know what is now the whites will be the minority, and there really is no one exact ethnicity or anything like that. Like I put it, the culture around this people in general, but you want to be able to show that kids can honestly do whatever they want. That they can not do it, but they can be whatever they want. So show books with people with all different types of races, all coming from all different nationalities, backgrounds, cultures, and just show that really anything is possible for them to do so. Incorporate that into your lessons as much as possible to be culturally aware of what's going on in your own classroom. It's going to change year to year, and it's just important to adapt as an educator to the needs of your classroom. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're going through different cultures in your classroom, be aware of different holidays, and maybe you can bring out books or something like that about different holidays such as Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or Hanukkah. Like there's all these different things that are going on, and it doesn't have to be the center of a curriculum, but to be touched upon so that way a student feels like some personal connection to the class. Like they're going to appreciate that so much in the classroom, and gonna appreciate you, and going to appreciate the class in general, to be able to share their own culture and beliefs with everyone else in the class. Everyone's proud of their culture, and it's so important for them to share it with everyone, and it helps the class as a whole really become just one big global community in the classroom, and can help eradicate so many of the problems that are arising around cultural differences, and can really make your classroom, the school system, and essentially the world just a whole better place. I hope this video helped explain some cultural differences and how to help solve them in the classroom, and what they are, and how you as an educator really how you really are on the front lines, and putting your best foot forward to help these students feel invited and warm, and hopefully they can reach their fullest potential. Have a great one.